Hey, faithful listener. Thanks for tuning in to the P40 Ministries Daily Podcast. This podcast is dedicated to helping you grow spiritually so you can grow personally. Let's grow together by building a consistent Bible reading routine. This is Jen, your host, and today we will be discussing the book of Exodus. Well, hello there, and good morning, friends and faithful listeners. Thanks for tuning in to the P40 Ministries podcast this morning, and I am Jen, the host here, and I hope you guys had a really great and fantastic 4th of July weekend and had some good food or something like that, and were able to enjoy your friends and your family members and maybe have a party or something and enjoy a good cookout. But my husband and I are actually in the process of moving right now, so a lot of our weekend was spent fixing up our current house so that we can get it on the market. So yeah, we've been pretty busy the past couple weeks, but yes, I'm very excited about that. But let's go ahead and talk about the Bible here and read Exodus chapter 9, verses 17 through 35. We are going to be talking about, I think, the 6th plague, which is the plague of hail. So let's go ahead and read this. I will be reading out of the WEB version of the Bible this morning. Because you still exalt yourself against my people, that you won't let them go, behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause it to rain a very grievous hail, such has not been in Egypt since the day it was founded, even until now. Now therefore, command that all of your livestock and all that you have in the field be brought into a shelter. The hail will come down on every man and on every animal that is found in the field, and isn't brought home, and they will die. Those who feared Yahweh's word among the servants of Pharaoh made their servants and their livestock flee into the houses. Whoever didn't respect Yahweh's word left his servants and his livestock in the field. Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand towards the sky, that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, on man and on animal, and on every herb of the field throughout the land of Egypt." Moses stretched out his rod toward the heavens, and Yahweh sent thunder and hail, and lightning flashed down to the earth. Yahweh rained hail on the land of Egypt. So there was very severe hail, and lightning mixed with the hail, such has not been in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. The hail struck throughout all the land of Egypt and all that was in the field, both man and animal, and the hail struck every herb of the field and broke every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, was there no hail. Pharaoh sent and called for Moses and Aaron and said to them, "I have sinned this time. Yahweh is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. Pray to Yahweh, for there has been enough of mighty thunderings and hail. I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer." Moses said to him, "As soon as I have gotten out of the city, I will spread out my hands to Yahweh. The thunders shall cease, and there will not be any more hail, that you may know that the earth is Yahweh's. But as for you and your servants, I know that you don't yet fear Yahweh God." The flax and the barley were struck, for the barley had ripened and the flax was blooming. But the wheat and the spelt were not struck, for they had not grown up. Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread out his hands to Yahweh, and the thunders and hail ceased, and the rain was not poured down on the earth. When Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunders had ceased, he sinned yet more, and hardened his heart, he and his servants. The heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he didn't let the children of Israel go, just as Yahweh had spoken through Moses. We left off on Friday talking about how Moses had went to go talk to Pharaoh about some of the things that God was saying to Moses. And so in verse 13, it actually says that God had told Moses to tell Pharaoh all of this stuff, basically, that God was going to send this hail if Pharaoh did not listen. And he also said that this was going to be the start of his most grievous, basically, is what the WEB version says, the most grievous plagues that God could send on the people. And he actually says that this was going to be a plague because of their defiance, because of the Egyptians' defiance and the Pharaoh's defiance. And he says that he is going to send this horrible, dreadful and heavy hail on the land of Egypt. Such has not been seen in Egypt since the day it was founded. So basically, from the time Egypt was created, there was never a hail like this in the land of Egypt, ever. And God says that he is going to send this horrid, huge, heavy balls of hail down on the Egyptian people. But he says here at this point, he's like, you guys basically are going to have a choice. You can either stay out in the fields and get hit by the hail, or you can go into the houses. You and your animals can go into the houses and you won't get hurt by the hail. So God gives the Egyptian people a choice. He says, either stay out in the fields and defy me, get hit by the hail, or you can listen to what I'm about to say and take all of your animals into the barns and into the houses and stuff like that, and you guys will not get hurt. And so it says here that everyone who ignored God's words or didn't take them seriously stayed out in the fields. This was probably midday. This was probably at a time when the Egyptian people had to work and, do their stuff. And so the Egyptian people at this point had a choice. Do I stay out in the fields and work and ignore these words that God gave us? Or do I go into the houses, stop work for the day, and protect my family and my livestock and stuff like that? So the people had a very clear choice of what they wanted to do. They could either defy God, or they could stop work for the day and go into the houses. So it says here that everyone who ignored God or did not take him seriously left his servants and his livestock in the field. But in verse 20, it says that everyone who feared the word of the Lord made his servants and his livestock flee into the houses and the shelters. And it says that these were the servants of Pharaoh who did this. So these were possibly Egyptians. These were Egyptian people that were hearing these words that decided that they were going to listen to God because they had already seen all these other plagues that had come down on the nation of Egypt pretty much, and were like, okay, God is somebody to be feared. So these people feared what God had said. And they went into the shelters and took their animals into the barns and everything like that and got out of the fields like God had said they should if they didn't want to die, basically. God gave them a very clear warning. It wasn't like God was just striking down the nation of Egypt. In fact, he said he wasn't going to do that. He said he was going to show his power to the nation of Egypt. And so the people who stayed in the fields and the people who basically ignored God's word died with this horrific hail. And it was basically like these fireballs coming down on the earth. And depending on what version of the Bible you read, some translate it differently. The WEB say it's basically giant balls of hail with lightning and thunder and stuff like that. Other versions say fireballs. Still other versions say the hail struck the land and fire was everywhere and stuff like that. So whatever was happening here, there was a lot of fire involved, basically, because God was using the lightning to create this fire and possibly was striking the hail as it was coming down, and the hail was catching on fire, or who knows what was happening here. But whatever it was, these giant balls of hail were coming down and the lightning was striking the ground. There was fire everywhere. Everything was basically getting destroyed. The hail was hitting the people in the fields and hitting the animals and everything that was left in the fields. That's exactly what God said was going to happen. So basically from the verses 22 all the way through 26, it says that hail struck down everything that was in the field throughout all the land of Egypt, both man and animal, and the hail beat down on all the plants in the field, and they actually even shattered the trees. Imagine a ball of hail shattering a large tree. This was crazy, crazy heavy hail that was coming down. I can't even imagine how heavy a piece of hail would have to be in order to destroy a full-grown tree, but basically this hail was huge. And so this hail is just raining down on Egypt, but the land of Goshen was safe. And that is where the children of Israel lived, and there was no hail in the land of Goshen. And so after this, it says that Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron and said to them, I have sinned this time, and the Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. So Pharaoh is distraught when he sees this hail coming down on his crops and stuff like that. And I kind of wonder, because God had said that the people in the shelters would be protected, I wonder if God did not destroy any houses with this, but this was mainly meant for the fields, which is kind of what it insinuates here, that hail really only rained down on the fields and stuff like that, and maybe the houses weren't touched as much. But Pharaoh, who is sitting inside of his palace, or whatever Pharaoh sat in back then, was protected. He didn't have any hail coming down on him, but he still was unable to go outside in the least. And so he sees this hail like raining down basically, and he is distraught. And he's basically like, I've sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are super wicked. And so he's asking Moses and Aaron, who are protected. And I can just imagine Moses and Aaron walking around the city completely protected and hail just falling around them, but not on them. And Moses and Aaron go in to see the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is like, I am wicked. Please pray for me. Pray that this hail goes away. He's like, my people are sinners. I'm a sinner, and all this different stuff. And so he's pretending like he is repenting because he wants this hail to be gone. He probably is scared of it. I mean, whenever anything supernatural like this happens, people get really, really terrified and really scared. And so the Pharaoh is scared of the result, but he wasn't scared of God. He didn't fear God. He didn't even consider God, really. It says here that Moses actually ends up saying to him, he's like, as soon as I leave the city, I'm going to put my hands to the heavens, and I'm going to stop the hail. And he says, I'll pray to God that he stops the hail and stuff like that. And he says that you will know without any doubt, and you will acknowledge that the earth is the Lord's. And he says here to Pharaoh something really interesting in verse 30. He says, but as for you and your servants, I know that you do not yet fear the Lord God. And that's a really interesting statement that Moses says here. And by the way, I just want to mention that Moses is doing a lot of the talking here, considering the fact that he was afraid of having a speech impediment. It's like he's like growing into his role almost, and he's doing a lot of the talking, which is very interesting. And but that's just kind of a side note here. But he says this to the Pharaoh. He's like, you don't fear God yet. He says, I know you don't fear God, and you don't even acknowledge God, basically. And your servants don't either, is what Moses says to Pharaoh. So Moses knows. He's starting to understand his role, and he's starting to understand the things God is saying to him. And Moses himself is probably seeing God's power as well. At this point, Moses is not only just going into his role the way God created him to go into that role, but he's also really understanding who God is, God's power. So Moses knows at this point that everything God is saying is true, and that Pharaoh was not going to let the people go, just as God basically said that Pharaoh would not let the people go. Moses is starting to realize this and understand this. And so Moses says, I know you don't fear God. So basically Moses leaves at this point, and he ends up stretching out his hands to the sky. God saw this, and the thunder and the lightning ceased, and the rain ceased, and the hail ceased. But then after this, Pharaoh saw that the hail was gone, and thus his problem was gone. And he went back to his old ways. And it says that his heart was hardened. He hardened his heart. And that's actually what it says here. It says in verse 34 that he sinned again and hardened his heart. So Pharaoh hardened his own heart at this point, and so did his servants. Their problem was gone. They didn't have to do anything. They didn't let the people go once again. So Pharaoh, no, he did not at all respect God. He didn't fear God. He didn't respect God. He might acknowledge God at this point, but he did not respect or fear the Lord. Imagine having that much arrogance, that you see all these crazy signs and wonders and plagues and everything that God is raining down, and yet so much arrogance is built up in this Pharaoh that he refuses to fear God. That's just blows my mind, kind of. But anyway, it says here that in verse 31 that the flax and the barley were ruined by the hail. So all the stuff that was out in the fields were ruined by the hail because the barley was ripe and soft. But it says that the wheat was not ruined from the hail because they were not ripened yet. So basically, God did not destroy all the food with this hail. God did say that he was not going to destroy the Egyptian people. And so he's allowing them to still have some food, because even though the barley was destroyed and the flax was destroyed, the wheat was not destroyed because it was still younger. So the people probably still had enough food to continue on until the wheat was grown. So God is still preserving the Egyptians at this point. But it says here that basically Pharaoh did not listen, his heart was hardened, and he did not let the Israelites go, just as God had predicted. And that is the end of this chapter. And we will be discussing Exodus chapter 10 on Wednesday. So join me then at 6 a.m., but also join me tomorrow at 6 a.m. for an episode out of Matthew. And we are going to be discussing Jesus' death tomorrow. So it's some heavy stuff, and join me then. It's going to be a great episode. Join me at 6 a.m. or later, whenever you choose to check out the podcast, because even though it's updated at 6 a.m., it doesn't mean you have to listen at 6 a.m. But friends and faithful listeners, thanks so much for tuning in this morning. Happy listening, and God bless.